Greetings to the people of this deteriorating planet. It's I think it's September the 7th. It's a Tuesday, whatever the day after Labor Day is. When you don't go to an office every day, it really doesn't matter what day it is, and that's especially true during the coronavirus mess. I just wanted to, first of all, I want to apologize for wearing the same t-shirt, the Smith & Wesson t-shirt again. I don't know what it is. This shirt is so comfortable. Every time I see it in the drawer, I see my other shirts, and I just instinctively reach for it. I've got like 2 or 3 shirts that are really comfortable. So you're just gonna have to deal with it. But I wanted to talk about a couple of videos that I saw that are kind of related. And one is a video by a young black conservative lady, and another is a video by a guy named Tim Pool, who's one of these new alternate journalists who runs around with a webcam, or an action cam, I guess. I don't know exactly what he does, but he goes from place to place and blends in with the hipsters and adds his commentary. And he apparently never leaves the house. I guess he's like Matt Drudge. I mean, except when he's out in the field doing stuff, because he puts up videos. It seems like every 10 minutes, and a lot of his videos, they'll feature Tim looking at some insane article from the leftist press, and you can tell his blood pressure's up, and he just has to talk about it. He calls himself a left-leaning centrist, but it's a funny thing. If you're a conservative, you can tell when someone's really a conservative, and they just can't say it. Dennis Miller, he used to be, he tried to be a hippie, he tried to be cool and fit in, and one day he just finally jumped out of the closet. And you can see little hints of this in other people, and some of them haven't made it yet. Like Chris Rock, in his heart, he's a conservative, but he just can't admit it. He can't admit it, so he's just gonna die closeted, I guess. Well, anyway, Tim Pool did a video, and it was about, well, he was reading an article from a British website, I think it was British. It was about a British actor, a guy named Fox, who I know nothing about. But apparently this actor gave an interview, and he said he didn't want to date awakened women. I refuse to say woke. You know what? I made it through the 3rd grade. I'm not going to say woke. It's bad English. He refuses to date, so-called awakened women. And someone wrote an article, some woman obviously, who uses dating apps, and she said that there's a dangerous rise in men who would not date such women. So apparently she doesn't realize that screeching feminist women are female incels. That's really what they are. I mean, nobody wants to put it that way, but it's the truth. So these videos are related. They're about people, not fitting in. The reason I went to see the video that the young black woman put up was that I had seen so much craziness from Black Lives Matter. It's easy to get the feeling that there's just no hope for black people, and that none of them have any common sense left. Even though, if you want the truth, it looks like the real BLM nuts are white. It seems like BLM is now a white movement. You can see BLM, riot videos, and it looks like something went wrong at the Romney family reunion. I mean, it's everybody there is white. I shouldn't laugh because it's terrible. It's terrible to see people caught up in delusion and insanity and hatred. But it's really true, and supposedly, now I don't know if this is true, but there's a rumor going around that the people who in BLM who actually are black they often have to restrain the white people, because the white people feel like they have something to prove. Oh boy. I really shouldn't laugh because it's horrible. But I watch these videos, and it's easy to get this impression that there's just no hope. And so I looked for black conservative videos, and I found this lady. She calls herself Jasmine Contours, and I believe the reason she calls herself Contours is that she is a makeup artist, and part of makeup is making your face look like it's not really the shape that it is, giving it different contours. That's my guess. Jasmine with a Y. And I was freaked out by this woman because I'm not a lonely person, even though I'm kind of a hermit. I'm not married, and I just kind of hang out. That's my life, and I enjoy it a lot. And I don't get very lonely generally, but I do get lonely for really, really smart people. because I don't really know anyone who's really, really smart. I used to. I got a physics degree, and then I went to graduate school in physics, and there were a few really smart people around. Of course, the problem with that is when you're around physicists, you're still lonely because physicists are generally inadequate socially. But I haven't really known a lot of extremely smart people that I could connect with in my life. And, when you're smart, you feel like you're waiting for people to catch up all the time. There are things you don't say because they're not going to understand. There are conversations you just don't start with them, jokes you can't make because there's no point. So I saw this young lady, and I was just amazed at how smart she was. It was, it's like there's a big herd of penguins, and they all look the same, and there's two penguins that are from a different species that have somehow gotten caught in this herd of 3 million penguins, and one of them suddenly spots the other a quarter of a mile off and just freaks out. So I watched her videos, and she talks about the horrors of escaping liberalism. She says she was a crack baby, and hasn't had an ideal upbringing. But she did a video about leftist bias in universities. And she's a college student, and she was extremely upset because a professor gave her an F, and she took a sociology course. Now, right away, you should know that if you're a conservative, you probably shouldn't be taking sociology courses. You probably shouldn't be taking courses in pseudosciences that are dominated by leftists, that are constructed to validate their ridiculous, manipulative hypotheses. You shouldn't be in a critical race theory class because that's just racist manipulation. You shouldn't be taking black studies. So you're kind of asking for it. She wanted to do an experiment. She knew something that everybody knows. She knew that black people have a lot of conservative values, and yet they go to the polls and they vote for the poverty pimps. They vote for the far left kooks. And of course, nothing gets better in black areas. I've put videos up about this young man, Travis Quinn, that I tried to help, and he died in May. And I used to tell him, I'd say, if you want to help your neighborhood, get out. I'd say get rich and then go back on the weekends if you're really determined to subject yourself to that. Go back on the weekends and I don't know, teach kids music, whatever it is you want to do. I said the people are going to be exactly where they are today 20 years from now. And that's really true. Anyway, she was talking about giving people, she was going to do this experiment where she showed people different statements that were obviously to me, maybe not to everybody, but to her, I suppose it would be obvious. She was going to show them statements that were obviously conservative or liberal, premised on liberal or leftist or conservative thought, and ask them which ones they favored. And then I believe she was going to ask them why they picked that, because it conflicted with their true beliefs, something like that. Well, she got into this project and apparently took it very seriously, and her instructor gave her an F, and he wouldn't let her use sources she wanted to use, even though he had a different standard for leftist students. Wow, that's surprising, isn't it? He wouldn't let her quote Dinesh D'Souza or use him as a source. And she went to him with an appeal, and he blew her off. She says, I haven't heard the university side, obviously. And then she went to the dean, and she says he blew him off. And she's so upset. She's so upset because this girl is brilliant. You can tell she's just really, really smart. And somehow she thought that college was a meritocracy. She thought that she was going to be promoted because of her brains. So that really hit a nerve with me. When I was young, I bought into that nonsense. I went to Columbia University. I was in the same class as Barack Obama, except unlike Barack Obama, I got in on the first try. Barack Obama was a transfer student. That means you weren't good enough to make it on the first try. And I was not the world's greatest student. I think my high school class had 89 students. I went to the best prep school in Florida, and I think I was, gosh, I don't know, 53rd or 59th or something. I did absolutely nothing except get drunk. I was an emotional basket case. I was a social basket case. My family was a complete catastrophe. All I wanted was to get through the day and go to bed without having a major problem. And that was my goal in life, was just to not suffer too much and avoid misery. I didn't have ambition. You know, ambition is a proactive thing. I was on defense all the time. So I accomplished virtually nothing, but I tested very well, did well in the SATs and all that. And Columbia University, the chairman of the English department, Mr. Carl Hovda, whom I never met, sent me a letter and invited me to apply. So of course I got accepted. And when I was there, I didn't understand that you couldn't just say what you wanted and be who you were and expect to be accepted. It's really not like that if you're a conservative or if you believe in God. And I was a little creep, you know, and I wasn't that conservative at the time. But still, I just didn't fit in. And I didn't fit in socially very well. The women were just appalling. And I mean, I had female friends there that I talked to that I liked basically, but generally these women were appalling. And I felt bad sometimes because I just wasn't connecting. But on the other hand, well, there's two things. Number one, if I had, you know, I would eventually have slit my throat, because there's nothing more unbearable than being married to a feminist. I mean, a hardcore screeching. I don't mean somebody who says, you know, women should be able to have a job. You know, I'm talking about the kooks. You know who they are. The people who say all sex is rape and that sort of thing. I would have been indescribably miserable if I had married one of these women. They were just beyond belief. Their hatred of men was horrendous. And this was a long time ago. It wasn't as bad as it is now. I'll give you an example. There was this young lady named June. And this girl was beautiful. She was like a little doll. You know, she just had delicate features, and she was graceful. She was a little, I'm not going to say she was Chinese. I will say, because there are no Chinese American citizens unless you have dual citizenship. If you live in America and you're a citizen, then you're American. But she was of Chinese extraction. She was a really pretty girl and really smart. She claimed she got 1530 on the SATs. Back when 1530 meant something. The tests are not as hard as they used to be. And for some reason, she would hang around on my floor. I lived in an all-male dorm, and she would hang out in the TV lounge. And I spent a lot of time there, too, because the alternative was to go to class. And I don't know, we just watched whatever was on. I don't know if she had an interest in me or what, because I was totally inept with women, and I wouldn't have been able to figure that out. But I remember one day we were sitting in the lounge watching something, and just out of nowhere, she pipes up and says, rape isn't a crime of sex, it's a crime of violence. And I thought, okay, well, good to have your input on that. It kind of shows where her mind was. And she was pretty well normal at this place. There was a girl named Angela who later became a soap opera producer, very successful. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to produce soap operas, but there's a lot of money in TV, even if you do a job that's not very demanding. So when I first knew her, she was a beautiful Italian girl. And I thought she was kind of a what's a good word for it? I don't want to say airhead, but I didn't think she was a person of great depth. And she was the kind of girl who would let somebody slap her rear end just to watch it jiggle, to show other people. And something that was wrong. You know, you shouldn't behave like that. But then like a year later, the feminist thing got into her head, and suddenly she became unbearable to be around. So she went from treating herself disrespectfully to becoming the arbiter of all social matters. I remember once, I just mentioned in passing that I had been in a room where a young man and his girlfriend were studying for exams, and I commented on the fact that the boyfriend was pre-med, and she started telling me it was very interesting that I commented on his major but not hers, which was something that had never come up in the conversation. Like I was supposed to, I don't know, call this woman on the phone and ask her what her major was and apologize for not asking earlier. So apparently I diminished her by not asking what her major was. So this is the kind of person that Angela became. I mean, I could tell story after story about this. And there were women there who were interested in me. It's not like I never had a date when I was there, but I was like one step above an incel, and I was very lucky that nothing went forward and progressed into a full blown Dante's Inferno type relationship. And after I left school, I left school. I didn't say I graduated. That came later because I had some trouble. I became a writer, and I wrote for a magazine at a major metropolitan newspaper, and I got glowing reports on my writing. I mean, I'm going to sound like I'm bragging, but words like brilliant were used, and they loved what I did. But over time, I just these people and I at the magazine, we just things just didn't work out, and I didn't understand why. And then I eventually ended up, I submitted things to other magazines, and I tried to write other things, and people were not that interested. And it wasn't because of the quality of what I wrote, and I didn't understand that. I started doubting that I could write, which was crazy because I wrote extremely well. I ended up with a couple of comic strips in development with the guy that developed Garfield. I ended up working with him, developing comic strips, and somehow we just couldn't have a meeting of the spirits. Things just didn't work out, and even though I was capable of doing very good work very easily, very prolifically, we just couldn't get it together. And eventually I realized the reason was I could never be Gary Trudeau. I could never be way out on the left and make the people who chose comic strips for newspapers happy. Those people were far left nuts. So they were looking for awful. There's a lot of really terrible comic strips. 100 years ago, if you wrote a comic strip, as long as it was funny, that was good enough. That's all they cared about. They looked for talent. And there were some brilliant people that did comic strips. I mean, Cliff Sterrett. Well, now I'm going to draw a blank here, but just go back and look at comic strips from 90 years ago, and you'll be amazed the quality of the artwork. L.Z. Seeger, the guy that did Popeye, was a genius. George Harriman, the guy who did Crazy Cat. Anyway, when I was starting to show an interest in this kind of thing, they wanted terrible comic strips, like about a black single mother, that's the kind of thing that really turned them on. There was a comic strip called Baby Blues, which is unspeakably bad. It was just about some lady, who was sore from breastfeeding or something and wanted to complain about that. I mean, that kind of thing. There was one called Rose is Rose, and it was about a typical suburban mom. And it was about as funny as Athlete's Foot. I don't have to tell you about the bad comic strips of the 80s and 90s. You can go back and look yourself. There was one called Zits that was an abomination. So the reason I didn't work out wasn't that I couldn't do good work. I had no problem doing good work. The problem was there was no way to get me past the people who were the gatekeepers, the leftists who bought the comic strips. So I never should have gone into it. I never should have tried. I should have tried to do something else. I never should have tried to get in good with women at Columbia University. I never should have tried to be I never should have tried to be an insider in any way up there. That just wasn't going to work. I mean, a friend and I, we submitted things to the humor magazine. They had a terrible humor magazine called Jester, which was the absolute opposite of funny. And it was obvious when you read the things that I wrote that I was critical of things like feminism and leftism. You just weren't going to get that past the leftists who ran the magazine. It just wasn't possible. Even though my work is exponentially better than theirs, which is not saying much, it wasn't going to happen. So I've had these experiences, and I also lived in Miami where there's a lot of leftists. There's also a lot of conservatives who are just fiscally conservative. And a fiscal conservative is a person who doesn't care about God and doesn't care about people, but wants to keep his money. So they're kind of liberal in their hearts. They're still not very pleasant people. And I should have known. I should have known that, number one, I should never have gone to an Ivy League university. And number two, I should never have stayed in Miami. I should have gotten out of there. I should have moved to some place, well, like the place where I live now, where there are nice conservative Christian people. I shouldn't have tried to be accepted by these characters. And this young woman who put up this video, I don't think she understands that yet. She thinks life is a meritocracy. If you're a conservative or you're a Christian, you really need to choose your battles. First of all, you got to choose the battlefield. You need to find an area where it's not, either it's a plus or it's not a big minus to be a conservative. You can be an engineer, you can be a medical doctor, even though doctors lean left. I mean, if you heal people, you heal people. You can be a lawyer. You'll get steamrolled in law school. I'll tell you that from experience. You're not going to be, your law professors will hate you and they will give you low grades. You can count on that, and they will give good grades to people that are totally inept because they look the right way and say the right things. But there are certain fields you can go into where you'll do fine. You're not going to be a successful artist. You probably won't be a successful singer or actor unless you keep things to yourself and then come out later. So this poor girl, I'm afraid she thinks she's going to make it as an academic. And if she wants to survive as an academic, boy, she is really picking the wrong battlefield. She's picking a tough battlefield. She's probably going to be blackballed over and over and over until she dies. It's just a fact of life. Robert Bork, the guy that was blackballed from the Supreme Court for nothing, brilliant man. He was on the faculty, I think it was Harvard or Yale, and he said that when he applied, there were about 40 far left nut professors, and there were 2 or 3 conservatives, and people objected to him joining because they thought he would overbalance the liberals. And you can look that up. He actually said that. So don't go into a field where people from the left are in total control. I know that the number of those fields is shrinking, and it's going to go to zero. But for now, think about engineering. Think about going into business. Run a tree service. You can get stinking rich in business, and you won't have a $500,000 student loan to pay off. So they can teach you to read comic books or how to look at a painting. They got a thing called a library. It's wonderful. You can literally get the same thing on the internet and from a library that people pay colleges for. I mean, if you want to learn languages, if you want to learn music, engineering, architecture, stuff like that, sciences, you're probably going to have to go to a university. But there's many things you can do that are very profitable and satisfying that don't involve a college degree. And not starting out $500,000 in the hole is a big plus. So that's my advice. If you're young, don't make the mistake I made. First of all, don't try to connect romantically with people who are not like you. Don't waste your time. It's going to end in heartache. I don't care how cute they are. I don't care how many TV shows you've seen where love overcame all. It doesn't work that way in real life. And if you're a Christian, you shouldn't even be thinking about it. The Bible says you're not supposed to be unequally yoked. You're not, because what does light have to do with darkness? The person that you're connecting yourself to is being pulled in a different direction all the time. That person doesn't hear the Holy Spirit. So when you burden yourself with someone like that, it's 100% on you. You know better. And there's one thing about God. He may refuse to help you, or he may take a very long time to help you if you step in something deliberately. So marrying your atheist boyfriend because he plays the guitar really well and likes long walks on the beach, or what, whatever your shallow reason is, God probably is not going to help you for a very long time, and you're going to go through a lot of suffering. And your boyfriend is almost certain not to become a Christian. So limit your social circle. Think about the battles you fight. And I was watching this video of Tim Pool, and he's talking about how women are angry at men because they won't date. There's 2 things that made him mad in this article. 1, they like young women, and 2, they don't like far left crazy women. Well, of course, it's obviously you don't want to marry a far left cat lady because they're unbearable. They're just unbearable. You're on trial all the time. They're constantly accusing you of things that you haven't done. They accuse you of having ideas and motivations you don't have. They want to tell you to accept these liberal canards that form the framework of their lives that are absolute nonsense. They want you to live by these things. Everything has to be recycled. You can't eat meat. I mean, it's torture. Why would you want that? So liberal women who are complaining about this, they seem to think that you're obligated to marry them. And one of the reasons age factors into this is that feminists, they say you got to go out and get a job. You got to be just like a man and get really successful. And then when you're really successful, you find yourself a man someplace, or, I'm sorry to say it, in many instances, a turkey baster. And then you hire an illegal immigrant to raise your kid, and you come home and your kid speaks Spanish and calls the maid mommy. That's how you're supposed to live your life. And there's some real problems with that. Like, first of all, it turns out, we didn't know this until a few years back, but apparently women become much less fertile in their 30s. That's one thing. And another thing is, men like youth. We just do. The most attractive women on earth that are eligible for marriage are 18 years old. I hate to say that. They may not have anything to say. They may not be good choices. They may be total airheads, like bread that hasn't risen yet. But when it comes to just physical attraction, there is no cosmetic like youth when it comes to men. Absolutely none. An 18-year-old 5, it looks better than a 50-year-old 8. That's just the facts. And women hate that and they get mad. Like there's something we can do about it. Like, wait a minute, I'll just open my head and I'll find the settings panel and I'll turn up the age knob. And it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. Men like youth. This is even true of gay men. Gay men love young men. So that's just the way things are. And women hate to admit this, but it's true. They look for men who are a little bit like father figures. They want a man who's going to be a little bit of an authority figure in their life. It's just a fact. You never hear a man say, wow, my wife really, really slowed me down and put me in my place today, and I really appreciated it. But women say that kind of thing all the time about men. And it's because women are not as stable as men. A woman's a different person every week because their hormones are up and down. And then, when they get pregnant, things go completely nuts. And men are much more stable. I'm the same person today that I was yesterday. I'm the same person every stinking day. Every day I'm the same person. And that's pretty much normal for men. A man forms kind of an anchor, a rock of stability, while a woman's going crazy and going this way and that way and yelling, "Get me chocolate," and so forth. The man serves as a damping influence on the spring that is the heart of a woman. That's the best way I can put it. And that's normal and healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, women have to have their hormones. People have to have children. We can't just end that. So someone's got to be there to be the anchor. And when men are a little older, they're better anchors. You really want to marry some soy guy who goes around with a beanie and black pajamas, throwing eggs at the police, and then calling his parents for money to buy more eggs? Is that the guy you want to marry? So it's disturbing that women are falling for this stuff. There's nothing wrong with marrying a man right out of college or while you're in college. I mean, if he's a suitable man, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with raising kids. There's nothing wrong with being a professional mother. There's nothing more important than raising children. Why would you entrust that to somebody from Guatemala? Why would you give up that rewarding experience? I had the greatest relationship with my mother when I was a kid. She took me everywhere, and she loved me so much. And I learned how to enjoy the warmth and the love of women from being with my mother. That's where I figured it out. I don't know where these guys who are raised by Guatemalans, I don't know where they get that. I guess a lot of them don't. Maybe that's why so many men these days are women. There's nothing wrong with being a wife. There's nothing wrong with being a mother. There's nothing wrong with having kids in your 20s. You don't have to be the Secretary of State if you don't want to. And Tim Pool was talking about incels. He was talking about these guys who are always griping about how good-looking women don't want them. You know, women aren't required to want you. I remember when I was in my 20s, I thought, gee, I'd be so nice to a girl. I'd be such a great boyfriend, and I'd like to have kids and be a husband and all that. You know, women should be more attracted to me. And that was idiotic. I was a nut. No women should have gone near me back then. No, they should have steered clear of me. I was a bomb waiting to go off. I don't mean that I was violent. I just mean that I was not going to be a big asset to a woman. I would have had to grow up very, very quickly to be anything resembling a decent husband. And these incels, you know, they're in the same boat. If you're sitting around watching science fiction and reading comic books 18 hours a day, and then going to a part-time job at Cinnabon, maybe you're not ready yet. Nobody owes it to you to be attracted to you. Nobody owes it to you to love you. People have to think about themselves a little bit when they choose a mate. Good-looking women like good-looking, successful men. Shocking. What can we do about that? Well, choose your social circle, choose the battlegrounds you want to fight on, and then once you're on those battlegrounds, choose your battles. Don't spend your whole life jousting with windmills. It's not going to work out. If you're a Christian, you need to know the Holy Spirit. You need to develop a strong prayer life. He'll fix you. He'll repair whatever it is your parents did wrong. And you need to find a woman or a man who's on the same page. Don't make things harder than they have to be. And stop complaining about shallow people who don't want to date you, because why would you want to date a shallow person? If you listen to me, this will save you a lot of grief. It really will. I messed up my life really badly. You don't have to do it. You don't have to take the bait. There's something you need to understand about leftists who are in control of things. They have to pretend to be open-minded. So when you walk in the door, they'll shake your hand and they'll say, oh yeah, we're glad to have you and we're very open-minded here. They do that because they can get in trouble if they don't. What they do is they let you take the bait. It's like Lucy Van Pelt and Charlie Brown in the comics. Every year, Lucy, of course, Charles Schulz is dead now, but they still read the comic strip. Reading a comic strip now is like visiting a morgue. You just can't get rid of the dead people. But anyway, Lucy would hold a football for Charlie Brown and say, go ahead and kick it. And Charlie Brown would say, I know you're going to pull it out of the way. And she'd go, oh, no, this year I've turned over a new leaf. And Charlie Brown would run up to kick the football. And of course, she would pull it away and miss. And all of Charlie Brown's clothes would fly off, which is disturbing. And he did this year after year. So that's going to be you. If you buy into this line of open-mindedness and fairness, it's not there. It's just not there. I mean, there are exceptions, but you're going to be excluded. You're going to be blackballed. People don't have to hire you. They don't have to promote you. And if they are professors, they don't have to give you good grades. They'll find ways. It's all subjective. They'll find ways around it. And then the people you appeal to, they will also be against you. So think about what you want to do with your life. Do you want to go through your life beating your head against the wall, or do you actually want to succeed? Get away from liberal areas. I mean, if you live in New York, just leave. Just leave. Leave. Los Angeles, get out. Minneapolis, I didn't know Minneapolis was so liberal, but it is. Get out. Get out. Stay away from New Orleans. Stay away from Baltimore. Stay away from Detroit, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., San Francisco. Go someplace else. There's other places where you can live well and have a good life. There's still a couple left. I really hope this will be helpful to you. I hope you'll listen to me, because otherwise the suffering and regret that you can bring on yourself is just about beyond measure. I wish you all the success in the world.